Hey guys, it's Jen, and I am back with another stamping and scrapbooking video after a little bit of a break, so thanks for joining me. I just wanted to go through a couple of things before I start here. And first of all, you can see that these are the photos I'm going to be working with, and I am going to today be doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to use any patterned paper on this layout. Now I know the last one I didn't really use any patterned paper either, but I want to show you how you can still get patterns or make your own pattern paper with just a couple of stamp sets. And I find it really helpful when I am going to be doing a lot of stamping to pre-plan my pages. And so I have my planner. I have the Get to Work book from Elise Blaha Kripe, and I have just gone ahead on all of the days. There's a grid at the bottom, which I find really helpful for sketching out page layouts. And this was a page I wasn't going to use. This was in my last year's planner, so I just decided this was a good a spot as any that I could go ahead and kind of plan this out. So you can see here, let me just make sure you can see that there, that I've gone ahead and I knew I wanted to use these two photos. I'm going to plan on doing a title that goes over the photo because this photo right here has a lot of open space that I can overlap my photo onto. I want to do my journaling right below that, and then this little kind of dotty thing at the bottom of my journaling means that there's going to be some stamping there. I'm going to stamp some icons. That's what the stars represent. I have two strips at the top and bottom, and that's either going to be masked stamping, or I will stamp on some paper and then cut it into strips, so we'll see how that goes. And then I've just gone ahead and written out the journaling that I wanted to do for this layout. Now, these are some photos from a trip that we took to the Oregon coast last June, and I have a system down for telling my stories for vacations, and I have a class called Photo Triage Vacation Photos, which will show you how to kind of go through your photos and decide which ones that you want to include in your album, what stories that you have to tell. And so this is one of the stories that I knew I wanted to tell, and I had already written down on my list, and with the system that I have in place. And so if you're interested in that, or if you have a ton of photos from a certain event or vacation, that would be a helpful class for you, maybe, if you want to learn how to kind of hone in on what stories that you want to tell from that specific set of photos or event. Anyway, so I've got this all planned out, kind of, and now I'm going to go ahead and get to the stamping. I'll go ahead and put you on fast forward. I may stop here or there to show you some different techniques, but I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so for my title, I want to do kind of an ombre effect on my letters, and so I thought I would just slow this down and show you how I'm going to create that look, and then I'll do the rest without you having to watch me painstakingly do that. So I'm going to do Feeling Free, and I'm going to do the word free in these large letters. This is the building block alphabet from Close to My Heart. Let's see if you can see it. There we go. It's a little bit of an older stamp set. You can't get it anymore, I don't think. But you could use any large letter alphabet stamp set. And I'm going to be using two colors from, these are again Close to My Heart inks. I've mentioned in the past I used to work for Close to My Heart. I have a lot of their inks. And so this is something that I use quite often, is the ink pads from Close to My Heart. And so I'm just going to go ahead and stamp these out. So I'm going to have the darker color be on top, which is Lagoon, and then the lighter color be on the bottom, which is Glacier. Now this is a prototype ink pad because, as I mentioned, I used to work there. So what I like to do when I'm doing kind of this ombre look is to start with the lighter color. So I'm going to ink my stamp up, the most of it, like a little bit more than the bottom half, in the Glacier ink, and then I'm just going to go on to my Lagoon ink pad. And if you want to, oh, I've got a little something on my stamp, I should have cleaned it off first. If you want to, you can take a sponge and kind of go over the part where these two colors meet. but it doesn't really matter much to me, so I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that down. Now, I like, just for kind of a cleaner look, to stamp over it. Well, since this is a clear stamp, sorry, I'm just grabbing a wipe here. Since this is a clear stamp, I can go over it again to get a bit of a smoother look. And so I'm just going to go back into my Glacier ink and just line this up and stamp it again. And that will just give me a nice smooth look when it's all said and done. So I'm going to go ahead, I'll show you one more. So let's do the R. Now I'm going to stamp these and then cut them out, so it doesn't really matter if it's nice and lined up on here. So here's my R. So again, I'm going to ink up the bottom half of the stamp, or a little bit more than the bottom half. I'm going to ink up the top half with the darker color. And it's hard to see because my stamp's stained, but I'm not gonna worry too much about it. And that looks pretty good. I don't want it to be perfect, but you can definitely see that there is a dark to a light color. And then I am gonna go back over it again in the Glacier ink like I did on the other one. Now this one's a little bit harder to line up because I have stained it. Yes, I didn't get it quite lined up. So I'm just gonna try it again and then I can lean my head closer over it. But if your stamps aren't black and stained like mine, you won't have a problem with this. And you really don't have to go over it again. It's just something that I wanted to try to get a smoother look. So I'm gonna go ahead and stamp the rest of these out. I'm gonna hand trim them and then I'll come back.
So I've got those trimmed out now, and I'm just trying to find something that will fill in a little bit of space around my photos and above the journaling. So I'm going to use this mask. It's from Studio Calico. It's pretty old, and it's just radial circles, and I'm using that with a little bit of Mr. Huey's Spray Mist, and it's I think it's Splash, and I just sprayed a little bit down at the bottom too, so it was in more than one spot. I just did it really subtly. I don't want it to be overpowering or anything, but I like the radial circles because my daughter in the photo is throwing her arms out, and so her arms outstretched kind of reminds me of the lines on that radial circle. So I like the way that looks. And I'm just drying it with my heat tool because I'm impatient. And I'm just going to arrange the photos now and get my title placed back on there so I can see how everything is looking. And you can see I'm overlapping it onto the photo. So off camera I was playing with the idea of handwriting the word feeling, and I am going to do that. So I'm just playing around with some pens to see how I might want to use it, if I want to just use a regular pen. And I do end up just using kind of a regular journaling pen, and I'm going to put the fill lines in, and so you just write it in cursive, and then I'm going to add in the lines and color it in. And my hand's in the way so you can't really see it, and I do end up smudging it a little bit because I wasn't being very careful, but I like the way it turns out in the end. So you can see I'm just adding in those lines. And if you have questions about creating lettering like that, my friend Tracy Claiborne has an awesome class called Easy Hand Lettering that teaches you all about how to kind of improve your cursive and create those fill lines. And it's kind of like a faux calligraphy. A little bit different than the brush script that I do. And it's a good starting point, I think. So I'll be sure to link to that in the video description. So now I'm just using a trick. I mentioned that I had smudged this, and so I learned this from Jen McGuire. You just take a craft knife and you kind of scrape the area where you messed up, and then you can use an eraser to kind of smooth it out. So now I'm just thinking I might want to get some pattern paper over to the right hand side of my photos, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm not using any actual pattern paper, so I'm going to be stamping this. So I just cut a piece of paper that would kind of fit nicely to the right of those photos, and I'm pulling out this stamp set. This is an old Scraptastic stamp set when I used to be a member of their club, and it's one of my favorite stamp sets. I'm just pulling out my Ranger craft mat here, and I'm pulling out this phrase, and it says Magic Memories, and I'm just going to stamp it over and over. I wanted a really graphic black and white kind of print for this, and I want it to be a little bit messy, And so I'm just kind of stamping that all over the place, keeping my lines straight, but kind of varying where the words start and stop, as you can see. So I'm just filling up that entire piece there. And this piece of paper is just over 8 inches. It's probably 8.5 inches tall and maybe 2 inches wide. It's not very big, so it doesn't take me a super long time to do this, especially because you can see I'm just going back and forth and I'm not being super precise or careful, and that looks great to me. I like the way that it turns out. So I'll just finish that up, and then I'm going to see how it looks behind my photos. Just filling in a few spaces here, and then I'm going to wipe this up really quickly before I move on, or I will forget. And here's that paper done, and I really like the way that it looks behind the photos, but I thought I wanted it to stand out a little more, so I'm just using my pen, and this is a I think a 0.0 or 0.8 size, so it's a little bit thicker, to outline that so it stands out a little bit more from the background. I do love white on white on white, but I wanted, because I was looking for some contrast here anyway, I thought it was nice to outline it. So here I'm pulling out another favorite stamp set. This is an older one from Ali Edwards from Technique Tuesday, and it has a bunch of different phrases on it, and I'm going to use one that says, I think it says "you are awesome," or no, it doesn't. I can't remember. I'll see when I stamp it. I'm using the Glacier ink because I want to bring a little bit of blue down to the bottom as well. Oh, it says "so totally alive." And I like that because that photo to the right of it just screams, I'm alive. And I thought that was cute. So I really like the way that looks. And I'm going to, I have this stamp set from Close to My Heart that has Oregon on it. You can see that's what I'm trying to show you here. They have these new stamps that they have one for every state, and then they also have the Canada provinces, one for Australia and one for New Zealand. And they're really cool. And I bought a couple that corresponded with some trips that I took. So I have one for Utah, which is my home state, and one for Oregon. I'm going to get one for Tennessee as well. And I just stamped it below "so totally awesome." I don't love the way it turned out, but you'll see that stamp set come back, and I'm going to use some other things from it. So now I'm pulling out this old stamp set from Close to My Heart. It's from their brushed Workshop on the Go, which is no longer available to purchase, but you could use any label stamp here. And I'm just stamping it on a separate piece of paper. Sorry that you can't really see what I'm doing here, but I'm going to cut that out. I stamped it in black, and I'm just going to cover it up. And I thought the black would be a nice contrast element to add to the bottom of the page, since I've got the contrast with the word feeling and then in the pattern paper that I created, and now I can have that bit of contrast here as well. So I'm looking through my little notebook to look at my notes from that day to see if what day it was on. I also pull that out to look at my notes for the journaling. And if you're interested in learning more about how I document vacations and some good techniques for that, you can check out my class, which is called Photo Triage Vacation Photos. It will help you kind of whittle down your photos and decide which ones to document, and give you some good processes for doing that. You can find that at classes.craftygemscow.com. So here you can see I brought back in that Oregon stamp set. I'm going to stamp that the shape of the state up above the word feeling with some tan ink, and I just wanted to bring in a little bit of tan to bring in the color of the sand in the photos. It's very prominent, and I think it's a good idea when you're using a lot of stamping to have a mixture of elements. So I've got a lot of text already, and so I thought it was nice to bring in something different, an icon. So that's what I did there. And then I'm going to change up that label so that I can bring a little bit of that tan color down to the bottom of the layout as well. And you'll notice that I stamp things on some scratch paper quite often. I think it's a good idea to have some handy when you're doing a lot of stamping, just so that you can try things out before you commit to them, because especially when you're stamping on the background of a layout. Now I'm pretty good at just going with it. If I stamp something and it's not perfect, I'm okay with that, but it's nice to have a bit of scratch paper on hand. So you'll see that I end up going with a label that has the tan outline, and then I stamp black in the center of it, and that ends up working the best for me. And I will pop that up eventually on some foam tape. And now I'm going to play around with incorporating some other elements onto the layout. I want to work on maybe doing those strips that I talked about at the beginning of the video. And so I just brought out some white paper and my, and I'm so sorry it's out of focus here, but it'll come back in just a second here. I'm just using a globe stamp, and I misted it to see what that would look like when I stamped it. It didn't turn out well, and so I'm not going to use that. But I'm going to try that with some Lagoon ink from Close to My Heart. That's the same ink that I used on my title. Again, I'm so sorry that's out of focus. Here we go. So I just stamped them so they're all nestled in together. I'm just looking for some sort of density so that I can turn this into a pattern paper strip if I want to. Now, I wasn't loving the way that looked, so I decided to grab this Dream Big circle, which is from the same Scraptastic stamp set that the globe is from. And I'm just stamping that over and over again, nestling the circles together and thinking I'm going to make some strips out of this. So I'm just stamping enough so that I can cut 2 strips from it, and just using some black archival ink from Close to My Heart. And I really like the way that looks, and I could probably do that on a whole paper and it would look really super cool. And I'm just making sure that I stamp some off the edges. And then I will go ahead and cut this into strips. Now, I do not end up using this, and you'll see why here in just a second. But I decided to leave this in the video so that you could get some ideas of ways that you can use stamps. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those into strips. And you'll see here in a second why I decided not to use these on the layout. I'm doing a Fresh and Bright beach layout, and they just felt really heavy. They brought the layout down, and even though it's a really cool look, it just wasn't right for these photos and for this story. But like I said, I left it in so that you could get ideas of what you could do. I could have stamped it in a different color and it might have worked, but I just decided not to use it. So because I'm not really quite sure what I want to do as far as that goes right now, I'm going to move on to what I do know, which is where the photos are going. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere those things down after I play a little bit more with trying to make those strips work. And after I adhere those down, I will get my title glued down as well, because those are the things that I know. And I just really super love these photos. And I always think it's a good thing when you're scrapbooking photos that you absolutely love. And so I'm glad that I get out my DSLR sometimes and take some photos that I really like. So again, those letters are on foam squares, so I'm just adhering those down and peeling off the backing. That's what you can't see me doing off camera, and just placing those on the photo. They don't end up perfectly straight, but I just let it go. I'm feeling free. So I'll just put down my last E there, and then I'm going to put a few finishing touches on the layout. I'm going to go back and forth on a few things, and my camera actually, I forgot to turn it back on. I turned it off to go do something and forgot to turn it back on. So I'll come back here and explain to you in just a minute what I did that you missed out on. But I'm going to play around with those strips a little bit more, and then decide that I'm going to use those globes. So I'm going to hand trim those out, and I'm going to stop the video here, and then I'll come back and tell you how I kind of finish things off.
So I started creating again, and apparently I forgot to turn on the camera. So I thought I would share with you kind of how the final layout turned out and what I ended up adding. So I added some little enamel dots to the edge of my label here that I stamped with, these two are Close to My Heart stamps, and then this is a roller date stamp, but it's a Project Life roller date stamp. And then I ended up adding a couple of flare badges, and these are from previous Felicity Jane kits. One says Adventure and one is a compass. So I kind of feel like this creates a visual triangle because they're all three things that are like popped up and have that heavy black contrast. I also used those globes that I stamped on that scratch paper, and I just kind of created, I felt like it needed something over here on the layout, so I created a little, I just like hand trimmed around them and tucked it in, and I kind of like the way that it almost looks like another patterned paper or just some almost bubbly or something like that, but I like the fact that it's also a globe, so it represents travel. And then I stamped Lovely Day, which is from a Maggie Holmes roller date stamp, to bring in a little bit more of that cashmere color with the Close to My Heart cashmere ink. And so I just want to keep this one really simple. It looks nice and clean, but I did a lot of stamping on this background paper. I did stamping here. My title is stamped. The roller stamps here. This is an Allie Edwards stamp here. So a lot of word stamping, and then just a couple of icons to bring in a little bit of something different for you to look at. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you want to see the other videos in this series, be sure to check out the Stamping and Scrapbooking playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also find photos of this project at the end of this video, as well as over on my blog at CraftyJenSchow.com, where I'll have more information and, like I said, the close-up photos. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.